You had a cup of coffee this morning, maybe two, and if someone told you that habit might be quietly affecting your kidneys, you would want to know, wouldn't you? Here is what makes this complicated. For years, doctors warned older adults to cut back on coffee. Some told patients to stop entirely, and millions of people did. They gave up one of the few morning rituals that actually felt good. But the research has shifted, and what researchers are now saying is more nuanced, more interesting, and honestly more useful than anything most of us were told in a doctor's office. Because it turns out the question was never really, is coffee bad for your kidneys? The real question is a lot more specific than that. And the answer depends on things like how much you drink, what condition your kidneys are already in, and a few key details that most people have never been told to pay attention to. I'm Grace Wells, kidney and diabetes health educator for older adults. And in this video, I want to walk you through what the science actually says, what has changed, what still applies, and what you should be thinking about if you are over 60 and you drink coffee regularly. Stay with me through this one, because the part that surprises most people is not the part they expect. Let's start with why this even became a concern. Coffee contains caffeine, and caffeine is what we call a mild diuretic. That means it can make your kidneys filter more fluid and cause you to urinate more than usual. For a long time, that was the main reason doctors flagged it. The thinking was, if coffee makes you urinate more, it might be putting extra stress on your kidneys or causing dehydration, which is harder on kidney tissue. That concern was not unreasonable. It was based on real physiology. And for certain people, it still matters. But here is what that early thinking missed. Coffee is not just caffeine. It is a complex drink containing hundreds of bioactive compounds. And one group of those compounds, called polyphenols, has been getting a lot of attention in kidney research. Polyphenols are natural plant compounds. They are found in things like berries, green tea, olive oil, and yes, coffee. And a growing body of research suggests they may actually help protect kidney function over time by reducing oxidative stress and inflammation, which are two of the main drivers of kidney damage in older adults. A large observational study published in the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology found that people who drank moderate amounts of coffee were less likely to experience a rapid decline in kidney function compared to those who drank none. That was not a small study. It followed tens of thousands of adults over multiple years. Now, this does not mean coffee is a kidney medicine. That would be going too far. Observational studies like this show association, not direct cause and effect. But it does mean that the old blanket warning, the idea that coffee is simply harmful to kidneys, does not hold up the way it once seemed to. The picture is more complicated and more hopeful. And this next part matters more than most people realize, so stay with me here. What the research consistently points to is that moderate coffee consumption in otherwise healthy adults does not appear to accelerate kidney decline. In fact, it may do the opposite. But that word moderate is doing a lot of work in that sentence, and otherwise healthy is doing even more. Because here is where it gets specific to you. If your kidneys are already under stress, whether from diabetes, high blood pressure, or a known condition like chronic kidney disease, the calculation changes. Caffeine raises blood pressure temporarily with each cup. And for someone whose kidneys are already working harder than they should, even modest, repeated spikes in blood pressure can add up over time. For most healthy older adults, the research suggests that 1 to 3 cups of coffee per day is unlikely to cause kidney harm. Some studies even point to benefit. But if your doctor has told you that your kidney function numbers are lower than they should be, if your GFR is not where it used to be, or if you are managing blood pressure with medication, this is a conversation worth having specifically with your own doctor. Not a reason to panic, but a reason to ask. If this is the kind of honest, practical breakdown you wish someone had given you earlier, that is exactly the reason I make these videos. Now let's talk about something that gets almost no attention in these conversations. and it may actually be more relevant to how coffee affects your kidneys than the coffee itself. What you put in the coffee. Think about your morning cup. Not just the coffee, but what surrounds it. Creamer, flavored syrups, high phosphorus dairy alternatives, added sugars. For people managing kidney function, these additions can create a concern that the plain coffee never would. Phosphorus is one example. Commercial creamers and flavored coffee drinks often contain phosphate additives, which are different from naturally occurring phosphorus in food and are absorbed much more readily by the body. For someone with compromised kidney function, excess phosphorus can become a real problem because the kidneys are responsible for clearing it, and when they cannot do that efficiently, it can affect bones and cardiovascular health. This does not mean you need to drink black coffee or give it up entirely, but it does mean that if your doctor has spoken to you about watching your phosphorus intake, the thing to look at may not be the coffee itself. It may be what is going into it. The same thinking applies to potassium. Plain brewed coffee actually contains a modest amount of potassium. For most people, that is not a concern. But if you have been specifically told by your doctor to limit potassium because of your kidney stage, then even modest sources add up across the day. A cup of coffee, a banana, some tomato sauce on your pasta, and suddenly you are close to a limit you did not intend to hit. This is not about fear. This is about knowing what you are working with. And there is something else entirely that often gets overlooked when people talk about coffee and kidney health. Something that works against you quietly in the background, no matter how good the rest of your habits are. Hydration. Here's the thing about caffeine that still matters, even if everything else about coffee turns out to be neutral or beneficial. If coffee is your primary morning beverage and you are not pairing it with enough plain water throughout the day, your total fluid intake may not be where it needs to be. Kidneys rely on adequate hydration to flush waste products, regulate minerals, and maintain the pressure gradients they need to filter blood properly. As we age, our sense of thirst becomes less reliable. It is a genuine physiological change, not a complaint, not a weakness. Older adults simply do not feel thirsty as accurately as they did at 40, which means dehydration can sneak up on you before you register it. If you have 2 or 3 cups of coffee in the morning and then do not drink much else until evening, your kidneys may be operating in a mildly dehydrated state for most of the day. That does not mean the coffee was harmful. It means the coffee was not enough on its own. A simple and evidence-based approach that works for many older adults is to follow each cup of coffee with a full glass of water. Not immediately, not as a rule that requires a stopwatch, just as a habit. Coffee, then water. It keeps the balance where it needs to be without asking you to give up anything. Your comment on this one might actually help someone else, because I want to ask something simple. When you think about your morning routine, do you drink much water alongside your coffee? Or is coffee most of what you drink before noon? Drop that in the comments below. You would be surprised how many people recognize themselves in that same habit. Let's come back to the science for a moment, because there is one more piece of the research picture I have not mentioned yet, and it is the part that surprised me most when I first looked into it carefully. Several studies have examined the relationship between regular coffee consumption and the risk of developing kidney disease in the first place, meaning in people who do not yet have a kidney diagnosis. And across multiple large studies, moderate coffee drinkers have shown lower rates of kidney disease progression compared to non-drinkers. One analysis that pooled data from multiple prospective studies found a statistically significant association between habitual coffee consumption and a reduced risk of chronic kidney disease. The researchers pointed to the anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties of coffee polyphenols as a likely mechanism. Now, to be careful here, this does not prove that coffee prevents kidney disease. Science rarely works in straight lines like that. But it does suggest that the old narrative, the one that treated coffee as an automatic risk factor for kidneys, was oversimplified. The reality is that for most adults, moderate coffee consumption is unlikely to be causing harm. And for some, it may genuinely be part of a health-supporting lifestyle. What matters is context. And speaking of context, let me address one more thing that often comes up in these conversations: kidney stones. Some people have heard that coffee increases the risk of kidney stones, and they stop there. They avoid coffee entirely because of it. But here is what the full picture shows. The majority of kidney stones are calcium oxalate stones. Coffee does contain oxalate, which is part of why the concern exists. However, multiple studies, including a large one published in the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology, actually found that coffee drinkers had a lower risk of kidney stones compared to non-coffee drinkers. The researchers believe this may be because coffee increases urine output and urine flow, which helps prevent the concentration of minerals that leads to stone formation. There is one exception worth noting. Certain people with a history of specific stone types, particularly uric acid stones or those with rare metabolic conditions, may receive different guidance from their urologist. If you have had a kidney stone and your doctor gave you specific dietary advice afterward, that advice takes priority over general population research. But for the average older adult who has never had a stone and drinks 1 to 2 cups of coffee a day, the stone risk concern is not well supported by current evidence. This does not mean go ahead and drink 6 cups. That is not what the research is saying. It means that for most people, a reasonable amount of coffee is not the kidney threat it was once assumed to be. So let's bring this all together. What has actually changed is our understanding of what coffee does inside the body. We now know it is not just caffeine. The polyphenols matter. The anti-inflammatory effects matter. And the evidence that moderate coffee consumption may support kidney health rather than harm it is now strong enough that it has changed the conversation in nephrology. What has not changed is the need to be specific about your own situation. If you are managing chronic kidney disease, talk to your nephrologist or dietitian about coffee specifically, including what is in your coffee. If you have been told to watch your potassium or phosphorus, think about total intake across the whole day, not just the coffee. If you take blood pressure medication and your numbers are difficult to manage, ask your doctor whether caffeine is a factor worth discussing. And regardless of where you are, make water a priority alongside whatever else you drink. Your kidneys will work with whatever you give them. Give them enough to work with. Here are 2 things you can actually do starting today. First, look at what you are adding to your coffee. If you are using a commercial creamer, turn it over and look for any form of the word phosphate in the ingredients list. You do not have to change it immediately. Just know what is there. That knowledge is what lets you have a more specific conversation with your doctor. Second, start pairing your morning coffee with a glass of water, not instead of coffee. Alongside it, that single habit can meaningfully support kidney hydration across the day without asking you to change anything else. A quick note before we close. Everything in this video is educational information. It is not a diagnosis, not a prescription, and not a substitute for the medical advice of your own care team. Kidney function, blood pressure management, and dietary recommendations vary significantly from person to person. Please speak with your doctor or a registered renal dietitian before making any significant changes, especially if you are managing kidney disease, diabetes, or heart conditions. Now, I want to hear from you. Has your doctor ever specifically told you to limit coffee because of your kidneys? Or have you been drinking it all along and wondering whether you should stop? Leave that in the comments. Because I read them, and because your experience may help someone else in this community figure out the right question to ask at their next appointment. If this video changed the way you think about something you do every single morning, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. And if this is the kind of clear, research-based kidney health information you wish someone had given you years ago, this channel is built around exactly that. New videos go up regularly. You can stay connected by subscribing so you do not miss them. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.